Welcome back to DESIUSA TV. Right now we have with us Mukta, who is the president of MAITRI. Thank you, Mukta, for coming and being on our show.
Pleasure.
So first of all, I wanted to know, tell us a little bit about MAITRI.
MAITRI is a domestic violence organization primarily. We serve the South Asian community here in the Bay Area. We actually operate a hotline service. We have support groups and we have transitional housing for women and children that are looking to seek a life free of domestic violence.
So does this happen a lot in Indian communities here?
You know, you'd be surprised. It does. And the thing about domestic violence is it transcends all communities. It transcends race, class, ethnicity, nationality, education. It definitely happens among the Desi community here. And it happens in different ways because we're an immigrant community. So not only do we deal with the issues of violence, we also deal with the challenges and barriers that an immigrant community deals with, right? How to present yourself to the mainstream, how to talk about your problems, you know, when it's actually happening in the home. A lot of women feel like they're blaming or shaming, their families are being blamed or shamed if they talk about what's going on in their married life. A lot of them feel like somehow they're made to feel like they're responsible for it. And because of the immigration issues, a lot of women can't necessarily just leave the country and go back. And not that they want to necessarily, you know, they came here in good faith, they came here to make the marriage work, and it's really not their fault that things just turned out so horribly for them.
So do you find that a lot of women have a difficult time integrating into the American society? Because that is a really big part of domestic violence. I'm sure that they aren't able to integrate into the society.
Well, you're right in that a large part of domestic violence is about isolation.
Right.
You know, that women feel like they can't access people outside their homes. A lot of the women that come here from the Desi community are on H4 visas, which means that they can't work.
They're dependent on their husbands.
They're dependent on their husbands. They're not allowed to work. And so a very specific agenda that MAITRI has is to integrate them into the mainstream community. It's to make them to enable them to stand on their own feet, you know, to make empowered decisions so that they can make decisions for their lives. So we never tell women what they should do. We're not in their shoes. We don't know, we don't know their challenges. However, we can give them all the referrals and information that they need to make their own informed decisions.
And is there like a specific group of women? Like, is there a specific type that, are more prone to facing this domestic violence, or is it just anyone?
It's anyone. There are certain things that help you get back on your feet after a domestic violence situation. It helps if you have a job. It helps if you don't have a dependent visa and that you can actually go out and seek a job. It really, really helps if you have the support of your natal family. If your parents don't support you, if your own family doesn't support you through this time, it's very hard for women to survive, and to make it on their own.
So would you consider MAITRI part of a family then for these women, that they can kind of turn to these other volunteers and people who are there for them? So it's kind of like a second family.
We don't like to think of ourselves as a family because the family has a right to tell women, or at least feels like they have a right to tell women what to do. In that we are different. We get called Didi, Akka, Tai all the time by the volunteers that call us, and it's a relationship of love and care. But at all times we have to sort of tell them that we're not going to tell them what to do. We're not in their shoes. They're the ones that are going to have to make the decision. So it's a family in that for the first time someone's actually listening to them and believing them and trusting them, right?
Which I'm sure is very huge for them, especially if they've been in a domestic situation where their husband doesn't do that.
So their husbands don't, sure, but even the community doesn't so often. I mean, batterers don't batter outside. It's such it's an invisible disease in that it's happening behind closed doors. And so if someone says to a friend, this is what's going on, and the friend says something like, oh really, he seems like such a nice guy, what's going to happen? This girl is going to be silenced because she's going to feel like nobody's really going to believe the stories that she tells, even if she decides that she actually wants to out, right, that she wants to actually talk about her issues.
So are you finding that more women are coming forward and seeking help, or are a lot of them just accepting the situation as it is and facing the domestic violence and not really doing anything about it?
No, I think when women call us, that's definitely an action. It's an action that they're taking to look for help. So it's never that people don't look for help, you know.
Okay.
They look for help in various ways. They ask around, they ask their families, they might make a call to Maitri, they might be confidential for months before they feel ready to actually talk about their issues. We are seeing that a lot of women actually call us very early in the game now, you know. It used to be 10-15 years ago when we started that people would have, you know, that the things would have gotten so bad legally and so on that they've really, you know, they've lost custody of their children, they've lost all property, they're on the streets, and then they call us, and then it's too late to even help them with any legal recourse. Now we find more, in a way that is more empowering, right? We find more people calling saying, I don't know, something's going on in my home, you know, this is what's happening, he's abusive, or, you know, he gets very violent sometimes, I don't know what to make of it, you know. And we never tell people, yes, this is abuse, but we work through what they're hearing to help them to help them actually own the fact, you know, that what they're going through is abuse or not. And you know, it's very difficult to make the distinction between abuse and a bad relationship, and we're sort of trained as volunteers to do that. The thing about abuse is it's chronic, it's repetitive, and it is aimed at humiliating and destroying someone's self-esteem.
So tell me about the volunteers. How does one help out? How does one become a volunteer?
You know, Maitri is so largely volunteer based. I mean, we could never do the kind of huge, you know, scope and scale that we're doing without our volunteers, right? But this work is very fragile, it's very tenuous, and it's very tough. There's a very high level of burnout. So the volunteers, many volunteers come because their heart is in the right place, they want to do something. But the thing about being a volunteer at Maitri is you need to have sustained energy. You know, you need to be able to participate at an ongoing level. The learning curve is very high, so it takes a while to understand the issues. So it takes at least a year to actually settle into the agency. Before a year, if you feel like, you know, this is not for me, which a lot of people feel, you know, a lot of people want to come in and be on a rescue mission. This is not a rescue mission for us. This is a being there for the women, independent of whatever choice they decide to make situation, right? And so we do have a very serious intake process where we ask them about how, how they heard about Maitri, what they would bring to the table, why they would want to volunteer. Then if they pass that intake process, they have to do a 40-hour domestic violence training, and then a 3-hour Maitri training. But you know, having said that, I also want to say we have all the room in the world for supporters, for volunteers that want to volunteer in non-client activities, right? So this evening's event, for example, you know, to help sell tickets, to help promote the event, to help usher, you know.